The credits didn't just represent numbers on a screen. They were the sum of 12 years spent inhaling the caustic dust of the Acheron mines. Cale watched the digital readout on his handheld flicker to 0, the finality of it hitting him harder than the dry overhead heat of the twin suns. Before him, secured by shimmering energy filaments that hummed at a bone-rattling frequency, stood the giantess. Her skin was the deep, bruised violet of a storm cloud, and her eyes, wide and luminous, held a terrifying depth of awareness that the auctioneer had dismissed as mere predatory instinct. He had dismantled his future, brick by brick, for a spark in her eyes. "She's a sterile unit drifter," the Vorgan handler spat, his multi-jointed fingers snapping the lid tethers. "Strong enough to haul ore until her heart bursts, but don't expect a conversation. They're just meat with a central nervous system." Cale didn't answer. He couldn't. He just looked up, his neck straining at the living statue unbound by a small man's courage. He led her away from the bleached plazas and the stench of the butcher's block, guiding her toward his battered sand skiff. The crowd laughed, a jagged sound that grated against the silence of the desert. They saw a fool trading a prospector's hoard for a galaxy's conscience. Cale only saw the way her massive fingers twitched, not in aggression but in a rhythmic, deliberate pattern that looked hauntingly like a calculation. The trip to his isolated canyon hab was a blur of orange sand and the oppressive weight of her presence. She sat in the open cargo bed, her knees tucked to her chest, a mountain of violet muscle in silent observation. When they finally reached the corrugated metal dome tucked into the shadows of the red rock cliffs, the silence between them became something physical. Inside the hab, the air smelled of recycled oxygen and soldering flux. Cale approached her with a pulse cutter, his hand shaking. He reached for the heavy restraining collar, a jagged piece of tech designed to suppress neural activity through blunt force electrical interference. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered, knowing she shouldn't understand. As the collar fell away with a heavy clatter, Lyra, as he had begun to call her in his mind, didn't bolt. She didn't crush him. She lowered her head, a slow, graceful movement that brought her face level with his. Up close, the complexity of her skin was staggering. It wasn't just pigment, but a fine, iridescent mesh of biological circuitry. Cale's fingers brushed the base of her skull, searching for the bruising the collar might have left. Instead, his touch snagged on a hard, recessed edge. He pushed back a lock of her hair, revealing a seamless, hexagonal bioport. It was clean, sophisticated, and pulsing with a faint, rhythmic amber light. It wasn't a mutation. It was an interface. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The sterility the traders mocked wasn't a biological failure. It was a lockout. Her people weren't beasts of burden or livestock. They were architects. Their very biology designed to interface with the kind of high-level technology the Vorgans could only dream of stealing. As Cale's hand lingered near the port, a soft chime resonated through the Ruma, sound not of a machine, but of a soul waking up. Lyra's hand, massive and warm, came up to cover his much smaller one, pressing his palm firmly against the port. In that moment, the Drifter and the Titan were no longer master and property. They were a circuit being closed. The chime wasn't the sound. It was a physical vibration that traveled from Lyra's bioport through Cale's fingertips and settled in the marrow of his bones. For a second, the cramped walls of the desert hab dissolved. He didn't see the rusted plating or the flickering hollows. He saw a silent symphony of a world reborn in violet light, great spires of living glass reaching toward a nebula that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years. The connection snapped shut as the perimeter alarm shrieked. Red light flooded the dome, reflecting off Lyra's wide, terrified eyes. On the external monitors, 3 Vorgan skiffs crested the canyon rim, their underslung cannons glowing with the ionized charge of a siege breaker. The handler hadn't just sold her. He'd tracked the transaction to reclaim the merchandise and the credits in one bloody sweep. "They're coming for the collar," Cale said, his voice tight but leveled by a decade of survival. "But they don't know what you are. Not really." He scrambled to his workbench, his hands moving with technical precision. He didn't grab a rifle. Instead, he snatched a handful of neural link cables and a high-frequency transmitter. If she was an architect, she needed a blueprint. Lyra, listen to me. I can't fight them, and you can't just swing at them. Not against those shields. He jammed the cables into the HAB's central environmental processor, his breath hitching as he offered the interface lead to her. But if you can talk to the HAB, if you can see the grid, we can turn this desert into a graveyard. The first blast rocked the dome, showering them in sparks. Lyra didn't flinch. She took the cable, her massive fingers delicate as she pressed the lead into her bioport. The transformation was instantaneous. The HAB's flickering lights stabilized into a steady, predatory violet. The heavy automated doors didn't just lock, they fused. Kale watched, breathless, as Lyra's eyes went dark, her consciousness diving into the primitive circuits of the canyon's mining equipment. Outside, the Vorgan mercenaries screamed as the very ground betrayed them. Massive hydraulic rock crushers buried years ago and forgotten roared to life beneath the sand. One skiff was swatted from the air by a repurposed crane moving with the fluid grace of a titan's limb. But the lead raider breached the perimeter, his power armor hissing as he leveled a heavy repeater at Kale. Drop the link, Drifter. Kale didn't move. He felt a warmth at his backup presence so vast it made the room feel small. Lyra stood, the cables trailing from her neck like regal tresses. She didn't use a weapon. She simply reached out, her hand passing through the air in a complex, geometric arc. The Vorgan's armor seized. The servos groaned, turning against the pilot, pinning him inside his own suit as the internal cooling systems bypassed and vented liquid nitrogen. The threat was neutralized, not with a bang, but with a calculated, biological override. The canyon fell silent, save for the crackle of burning wreckage. Lyra pulled the link from her port, her knees buckling from the sheer cognitive load of the interface. Kale caught her or tried to, his small frame braced against her side as they both slid to the floor. The violet light in the HAB faded back to a soft, warm amber. We can't stay here, Kale whispered into the quiet. They'll send more. Not just for you, but for what we found. Lyra turned her head, her skin glowing faintly where his hand rested against her shoulder. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. The image was there in his mind, clear as a star chart, a coordinate in the outer rim, a nebula thick enough to hide a fleet, and a garden world waiting for its architects to return. Kale looked at his empty safe, then at the Titan who held his hand with a grip that could crush steel yet felt like a promise. He had spent his life savings to buy a slave, but he had ended up earning a future. Together, they boarded the remaining skiff, leaving the bleached ruins of Acheron Prime behind. As they broke orbit, the first light of a new sun hit the cockpit, and for the first time, Lyra smiled. It was the smile of a revolution beginning.